Some interesting verbiage that was used by Governor Andrew Cuomo this morning that says the worst may be over. Is it? I mean, there's still a lot of people dying every day.
There's a lot of people dying, especially in New York, Pete. The New York death toll went over 10,000 today for the first time, an incredibly gruesome milestone for that state. There's still almost 700 people died in the last 24 hours. So what Governor Cuomo is saying is that he thinks the deaths are peaking. It's been about 4 or 5 days when it's been a similar horrific level of death, but it's not going any higher. So what he's saying is maybe the worst is over if New Yorkers continue to pay attention to social distancing, but we really don't know. That's about as optimistic as he could reasonably be. Hospitalisations in New Yorkers have also slightly gone down, so that is feeding into his optimism. But it's amazing days, isn't it, when we say that almost 700 deaths per day is the worst is over.
So is there any talk at the moment? I mean, whether it's weeks away, whether it's months away, Cam, is there any talk about how restrictions will eventually be eased?
There's a lot of talk about it. I mean, there's a big flare-up today between Donald Trump and the state governors because state governors really control when you ease these social restrictions, Pete. Donald Trump wants to say, he said today, Donald Trump has said, I am in control. I will tell you when the restrictions will be eased. The state governors are much more cautious about it. Donald Trump wants the economy to be reopened pretty much at May 1. That's what he wants. The state governors, you can see, are very much more cautious than that. And, of course, there's no way that state governors like Cuomo in New York City will advocate an early opening given the terrible death toll that they've had. So I think we're going to have this inherent tension between the governors and with Trump as to when the economy reopens. Everyone is talking about how it's going to happen. The consensus seems to be, if there's any consensus at all, that it will be a very, very slow and staged reopening.
I guess the problem too is, if let's say Governor Cuomo does ease restrictions and then there's the second and third waves that everybody's talking about, he's the one that's got to wear all that, right?
That's exactly right. And, this is what Anthony Fauci, the top diseases expert in the coronavirus team, is saying. He's saying, look, if you do this early, you will get a second wave. And that's going to be obviously a horrific health problem. And it's also going to be a political problem, not just for the state governors, Pete, also for Donald Trump. If Donald Trump is seen to advocate a get back to work ethos and he finds 3 months from now there is a second wave right near the election, I mean, that could be certainly terrible for him politically.
Well, how do you think he's gone in recent weeks and months? I mean, you mentioned that he wants to get the American economy going as soon as possible. I mean, all economies around the world want that. But he wanted it done by Easter, and that was never going to be achieved. I mean, how possible is it going to have that economy, reopen in a couple of weeks? I mean, realistically,
I think it's very unrealistic, Pete, I think, at this point in time. I think what we're saying, I mean, Donald Trump, he's a bit of a salesman, so he's talking up the markets to some degree. He's pleasing business by saying he wants the economy reopened, but these are really aspirational things that Donald Trump is talking about right now, because this death toll is something that many Americans, people I speak to all the time here, they're quite scared. They're very worried. They're very shocked by it. And, Donald Trump saying get back to work is not going to make people want to go on the subway. It's not going to make people suddenly go to a restaurant or go to a bar. They're just not going to do it. So really, in a way, whatever Trump says, there has to be a sense of safety here for people to actually follow his direction, I think.
OK. Only a few hours ago, Cam, there was a development in the Democratic race for the White House. You got Bernie Sanders, who's finally thrown his support behind Joe Biden.
That's right. I mean, Bernie Sanders, Pete, has been much better behaved this time around than he was 4 years ago. You might recall then he fought Hillary Clinton all the way to the convention despite not having a chance. And only then did he endorse Hillary Clinton in a very lukewarm way. Very different this time around. Sanders has come out and he has now endorsed Joe Biden. Of course, he pulled out of the campaign only about 4 or 5 days ago. And this is a big thing for Joe Biden because Joe Biden really needs the army of young Bernie supporters, the Bernie bros they call them, to back him, to come out and vote for him against Donald Trump. And what Sanders has said today is, look, the most important thing for us is simply to beat Donald Trump. I've got my differences with you, Joe, but you're the best guy going around, or I'm going to endorse you. That's very different Bernie Sanders to what we saw 4 years ago, and it's a big moment here for Joe Biden because it certainly gives him a big boost in his campaign.
So was there any kind of deal, do you think, that had taken place there?
Well, there's been a few backroom discussions, no overt deal, but quite clearly Joe Biden has said that he'll take on some of Bernie Sanders' progressive causes And so you'll see Sanders push Joe to the left in the coming months to placate Sanders and to get Sanders supporters on board. I think that's what you'll see.
Yeah, and perhaps also soon as well, Cam, do you think that we might even hear from Barack Obama? Understandably, has been quiet while the Democratic nominees sorted themselves out, but do you think he'll eventually step in and throw his weight and his support behind Joe?
Absolutely. I mean, Obama's just biding his time. He will come in and he'll be a very active player in this. And of course, he's been completely silent and completely neutral all the way through the primary process. Yeah. But he will be a major player soon. And that, again, that will very much help Biden, who's hitched his wagon to Obama all the way through.
Yeah, he has indeed. Cam Stewart, always good to get your thoughts. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you again later in the week.